Seamless acceptance is here, and mailers all over the country are working to successfully comply with its requirements. We're here to tell you their stories. Welcome to Seamless Success, where we guide you to successful seamless acceptance strategies. Tune in as Jeff People sits down with successful mailers, highlighting their colorful stories to illustrate their winning strategies. Listen to their valuable insights. Discover the right tools and processes they used. Understand best practices and grow your seamless success. Here is your host, Jeff Peoples.
So, Richard, I'm so excited to talk to people about the whole process of getting new technology into the seamless acceptance space and how people can really benefit from there. And I was wondering if you would just talk about your experience, where you come from, and it's not all the same when you're developing software, and this whole process of asking people what they're really looking for, and how do you discover what they're really looking for as opposed to what they say publicly. And I don't know if you could give a little background and talk about that, because I think that's going to have a big bearing on what the result is and why we're really interested in learning what people are reaching for.
Yeah. When I think about innovation and creating a tool that's actually valuable for people, the first step for me is like something I learned from Scott Cook. He's the guy who founded Intuit. And his basic idea is get out there and actually talk to the customer, like get into their environment with them and just watch them work and listen to them talk about what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. You think about this. I mean, most of these companies have quarterly goals, monthly goals, management chains. They're trying to accomplish results. And they can talk pretty articulately about, hey, here's what I'm really trying to do. Here's what's getting in my way. Here's where I'm experiencing pain and trying to get things done. And when you listen to that, then you can start to see ways that you can produce beneficial technologies that help them achieve their goals. Reduce in accelerated and better and bigger ways, while reducing the pain that it takes to do so. And that's like the way Scott Cook would talk about that is he called it follow me homes. And Scott, the term follow me home, which has such a cringy sound to it, comes from Scott. When he was trying to build Quicken, he went to supermarkets and he would stand there by the cashier line, and he's the most gentle, cool guy. And he'd watch people filling out their checkbooks. And when they got done, he'd say, would you mind explaining to me what your process is for, keeping this ledger and managing your account? And people would say, sure. He's like, I'm trying to build a piece of software that actually makes that easier. The whole process of managing your personal finances. And people would let him come home with them, and they'd sit down with him and break the whole thing out, show him the receipts, show him this. And through seeing that and hearing them talk, he started to get the ideas of how to build Quicken, which became, the mega successful personal finance product for a couple of decades, and is still a major piece of software for a lot of people. And then out of Quicken came QuickBooks, the small business accounting software app. And the culture that he had there was one of everyone in the company, the CEO included, was expected to go do these follow me homes, go to the customer's office, go to their, place of working and watch them work and listen to them talk. And so that was the culture, And I remember coming into it, and I had a bit of like an enterprise software background. And in the enterprise software, we used a different set of assumptions. We assumed that we were working with these highly technical workers who were very skilled, had strong system administration skill sets, certifications, and that sort of thing. So we designed the software to be an instrument in the hands of a skillful user. And when I showed up to Intuit, I was thinking kind of in that way. And they came back to me and said, no, these users aren't, skillful technicians. These users are just ordinary folk who have a goal and they're trying to get something done, and they need the technology to make it easier for them to get it done. They don't need the technology to become something that's like takes the skill of a musician playing an instrument to use, like, if the customer comes in and is like, what I want is music. And your response is, here, learn how to play the guitar. You can have all the music you want. There's a percentage of the group that will say, yes, in fact, I want to. And you can get into the guitar lesson business, but it's like the bigger chunk is the group that's like, actually, I just want more music. I want better access to more of the music I love. Intuit's culture was like, find a way to give them that, find a way to give it to them easy. And because of that, Intuit has, really been like this market leading company in all of its spaces, in personal finance, in small business accounting, in tax preparation software. Intuit dominates those categories. And I think one of the reasons why is because Intuit has focused so hard on this question of how to get the customer's outcome that they want. Whereas everybody else who plays in those spaces gets into how to build a tool that has like all the features that would drive a sale. And they're paying more attention to just like well-closed deals. And that kind of gets them off the rails and into this space that I call the solution trap, where they're stuck in this world of technical jargon. They're not really talking to their customers except in a reaction, either trying to close them on a sale or reacting to the customers, I'm having a problem, help me out here. Those are like the only two conversations that are happening. And the company loses it's not having a conversation with the customer saying, hey, what do you really want? Like, what's the outcome? It's more like, I know what you need this, buy it. Customer's like, okay, fine, I bought it. And now later the customer's like, I'm not getting the value I want. And or more like, I'm stuck here and I don't know what the hell to do. Like, where do I, and your tech support team is over there trying to teach them what to do. And it's that perpetuates this gigantic mess. So these companies kind of lose their way because they're not in this conversation. So when I left Intuit, I was deeply influenced by those ideas. Those were principal and kind of foundational points of inspiration for me. And I also, the interaction design discipline was just getting off the ground in that period of my career, probably like 2005, 2006, 2007. You started to see these books coming out by these design thinkers who were saying, here's how you design a system. And they were more methodological in their approach. And one of the books that I met, it was so strange to me when I first met an interaction designer. I'd never experienced one in my first like 5 years of my career. So when I met one and he and I sat down and talked, I kind of didn't know what to make of him or figure out what the hell he was doing. And he kept showing me these strange, artistic, almost pictorial diagrams he had. And I was kind of stuck in the solution trap myself. I was like, but what we got to do is define a feature and get it to engineering. We got to make sure that the requirements are clear and they know what to build. And he's like, no. We need to back up and we need to understand what the user's trying to get done. And I remember it kind of didn't register in my thick skull at first, But I was curious, and this guy gave me a book, and he said, check this out. And he gave me this book by Alan Cooper called About Face. And, you know, it's like, what's an about face? I think it's like turnaround, right? It's like, and I started reading this book, and this book did such a great job of articulating the idea that if you want to design something, if you want to build something, you should think about how to design it first. A lot of times we jump straight to building and we haven't done design thinking yet. And what design thinking does is it causes you to consider the end objective of what you're inventing first. So it's not, you know, you force yourself to actually think about that so that you can hold the system work that you do afterwards accountable to that goal. And often that doesn't happen. You know, in waterfall, there was some of that, but not really. There wasn't a lot of design thinking. Anyone who worked in waterfall, anyone who was in those environments knows that there weren't interaction designers. There were product managers who would get requirements and write them up like this legal document. And then there were engineers who'd look at it, and what did the user interfaces look like? They looked like Windows, man. They were just like Windows interfaces. You know, you just built to kind of like the standards Microsoft. That's you built these systems, and they're just ugly software that just had stacks of, you know, rows and columns, and it was just tabular interfaces and menu structures, and there really wasn't this idea of user experience. Now there's this awareness of how to help people. And when Agile first came along, it like threw out waterfall. It was like, get rid of this waterfall process and just start building and get feedback from the market as fast as possible. It'll be superior to waterfall. But there was this hostility that emerged to anything that people called big design up front, like really investing the time and energy to understand. But that hostility didn't come from waterfall being too design thinking oriented. That wasn't what created that hostility. What created that hostility was that waterfall wasn't about design thinking. Waterfall was about legislation and litigation between departments that didn't really even understand each other and were throwing poorly crafted tools of communication across fences, and then creating this slow train wreck where by the time the project is supposed to be done, it's 5 times over budget or 10 times over budget or 100 times over budget. And the whole thing is like sliding off a cliff into the ocean, and no one's going to benefit from anything. And there's some program manager showing up every week with a smile going, boy, we made great progress this week. As you round the corner of 100 million down the drain. And then finally somebody's like, we're done. We're not going to keep that one alive. That thing's dead. We're starting something new. That's the norm. That's what people were reacting to. Now what you have is this culture that's more about, let's ask, what does the customer really want to achieve? And then let's hold our thinking accountable to how it helps with that achievement. And there's also this idea of let's not operate in siloed organizations that assume that the knowledge can only reside in one part and everybody else can be guided by that knowledge. Let's call that, you know, and instead let's say everybody who's on the team who's touching this thing, you know, shaping this thing, designing this thing, building this thing, testing this thing, every single one of them needs to comprehend that outcome and needs to be able to help hold the project accountable to the outcome. And if you have members of the team who have hands in the mix and are shaping the thing we're building, who do not understand the outcome we're trying to achieve, that's like having a musician in the band who doesn't know the song that we're all playing. You know, we all just got up to sing, you know, Fly Me to the Moon. And it's, you know, Jeff's over there going, fly me to the moon. And we got a drummer going, and we got a bassist going, do, 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 do. And then there's a trumpet player over there going, boop, 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 ba, 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 ba. You know, it's like ruining the song while we're all trying to play the tune. And this, and then, you know, what's awful is oftentimes that person who doesn't understand the outcome starts to get louder, you know, like they're pushing the band back, saying my idea, and it just creates a mess. So when after going through a bunch of that, you know, I'd estimate I'd been through, you know, $300 million worth of whiteboard to shipped software experiences where I watched what we did fail more often than not. And I took time to really reflect on the question of why did all that failure happen? And what I saw was it was this lack of shared purpose. It was this lack of shared understanding of the customer and the outcome. And it was this blind trust that people kept putting in the idea that if they just kind of focused only on their part, and if other people would just do their job, and if there's a bridge that's needed between us, it's your job to build the bridge towards me, and I'm not even thinking about it. You know, it's like that attitude right there. It was killing everything. And the story of how I came to the idea of shared purpose is actually a meaningful one. It's worth telling. It's one that's a little hard to tell. It brings up some emotion for me, but I was that into it, and this guy walks in one day and they put him in as the general manager of my business unit. So, you know, I was in this business unit that was about 100 million in revenue, and this guy was the GM. His job was to manage the P&L of that business unit. And when he came in, he had a very impressive pedigree, you know, PhD from Oxford University by age 28, you know. The next 3 years, the number one guy in the Boston Consulting Group's management consulting practice in the Boston office. And then he and one of the Boston Consulting Group partners get hired out of BCG into Intuit on a contract that was like millions per year to help strategically pivot Intuit. And this guy got put in as the vice president of strategy for Intuit, then like a $6 billion company. He's only 31 years old. And about 2 years after he gets put in that VP of strategy role, he then gets assigned the role of being a general manager of this $100 million business line where I was working. He shows up as my manager, my like GM. I was actually a couple of clicks beneath him in the management chain. And we met, and we quickly kind of got into a conversation about how we both like to read a lot. And he said, you know, I wrote a dissertation. He said, and what it was on was economic sanctions and the efficacy of economic sanctions since World War II as an alternative to war. So like the theory is that the reason you sanction is because sanction leads to less dead bodies on both sides. And it's a form of, you know, kind of diplomatic hostility. But, you know, the problem with sanctions is, while it has this nobility in its idea of actually reducing casualties, like 99% of the sanctions fail. They don't achieve their intended objective, and they run out of funding, and they, you know, it kind of just doesn't work. So he was like, well, if sanctions as an alternative to war is a good idea, then let's go look at the sanctions that did succeed since World War II and see what they all have in common. And what that common thing is that's the same amongst all the sanctions that worked, but none of the sanctions that failed did that thing. So it truly is this thing that created the success. So his, you know, 380-page dissertation is this very dry analysis of all this data from all of these sanctions that achieve their goal. And out of that, he deduces that the thing that caused success in an environment where failure is the norm was shared purpose, on the outcome to be achieved. So a successful sanction looked like all the countries coming together and saying, we agree that by January 25th, we want to have this country stop engaging in military activity X. And we notice it's not we agree that we're going to do these things to sanction this country. It's not that. It's we agree that by this time, we want this outcome to be done. And we're going to invent and reinvent all the way through towards that outcome. And so we don't get lost in this conversation about, hey, what did we say we were going to build? And hey, it changed. And hey, you lied. Or hey, you were wrong. Or hey, that's not my job. You don't get lost in that. The conversation is, how do we do the goal of achieving by this date, this outcome? And every day we ask, are we on target? Did we get it right? Or do we need to change to get to that target? The sanctions that were defined by people like that, who had a shared goal by a shared date, succeeded. The ones where all they had was an otherwise disassociated hatred for the nation, one nation's there going, he painted a picture of my dad's face on the floor of his hotel and people walk across his face every day and I hate him and I just want to see him, get punished. And the other one's got like a really practical goal with the country. Like, we want to actually change the way they're exporting this because it's hurting our trade. Yes, but we agree they should be sanctioned. And then what it does is it starts this argument between the nations that just consumes all the resources and never accomplishes the goal. So I had a reading group at the time, a group of guys where we get together and we called it the Junto. It was inspired by Ben Franklin's Junto. Benjamin Franklin, back before he set up, one of the first fire departments, one of the first libraries, he created kind of a mastermind. Junto means a group in Spanish. And it was like a group of people who get together and read each other's papers and books and talk about their ideas. And so I had this group of guys where we'd get together once a month. We try to read a book a month, and then we get together and we sit down and we talk about it. It's just neighbors. And I gave that dissertation to all those guys, and we had a group conversation about it. And I came back to him and I said, I think this idea of shared purpose could also be what's killing so many software projects in terms of their success. And I think there's maybe a critical insight there that if I focus on getting shared purpose on the team towards the outcome we need to achieve, then maybe that'll fix everything. And he wrote back, he said, hey, congrats on the cross application of the insight. He said, I never would have thought of that. And I was like, well, let's give it a try. So at that point, I started saying to myself, okay, well, I think it starts then with everybody coming forward and offering their point of view on what the outcome should be, and obviously they should go talk to some customers first. Like, if you haven't had a conversation with customers, why would you assume that you know what they value? And if your logic is, well, because our sales literature and our marketing literature and our systems are designed this way, and obviously that's because that's what customers want, that's nice and that's well-intentioned, and but it's naive. You haven't spent enough time in software. That's an uninformed perspective. There's nothing that is more common than marketing and sales and software that are out of touch with what customers really want. That's pretty normal. So you can't just blindly trust it. You have to actually, so people go and do their conversations, have some calls, and then they come back and they say, here's my point of view, based on what I learned about what the customer's really trying to get done and what their experience in trying to get that done really looks like and where it can be problematic. Now, I brought people together in a room and I said, here's the approach. We're going to call these customers up. We're we're going to have these conversations. That was easy to do at Intuit because there was such a follow me home culture. And I was like, let's go ahead and have, let's talk to people. Let's have these conversations. And I remember I pulled together about 60 CEOs of small businesses. And I did some business intelligence work first, where I said, these are companies that have been on the platform for a few years. They have really big data files. They do a lot of work in the app. And they're going to be able to speak with a high level of articulation about what it is they value and what it is they're looking for. And it was fun. I got on the phone with these CEOs, and Intuit was a very pedigreed company. Like I said, that guy, Oxford PhD by 28, that wasn't uncommon at Intuit. You'd meet every person you talk to had some combination of Stanford, Harvard, Oxford degree. And so I'd call these guys up, and, these CEOs would be a little tentative with me, a little quiet, little guarded. And because I was like an Intuit guy. And I had to just kind of straight up start telling them on the phone, hey, what's up? Yeah, I'm a CEO. I'm a former CEO. I'm a failed CEO. I've been bankrupt. I was raised in Detroit, blue collar guy, washing dishes and stuff. And, I basically got a mercy degree. I graduated from high school with a 1.282 GPA and got a mercy degree from my church, in college. And, I've been a failure, just kind of scraping my face on the cement most of my career. And and I love it. I just can't get enough of software development and business development. And so, you can just level with me about how things are really going. And then those guys would be like, oh, fantastic. Cool, man. Let's talk. And there was this refreshing openness where we were able to really get into a conversation about what they were dealing with their business. And they really let their guards down. And what they started to tell me was, hey, you know what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out which of my products and which of my customers and which of my employees are most helpful to my profitability, and are helping me make money, and which ones aren't. Because I feel like I'm shooting in the dark, like I'm not sure which of my strategies are really paying off. And I have very little insight into that. And, all I know is what's in my bank account and, what's going on each day and whether I have enough to pay the bills and any left over. And, I don't have so we started to understand that outcome, and I pulled the team together and I said, well, why don't they feel like they have that kind of control? What's getting in the way? And it was out of that we started to develop the concept of, some business intelligence software that would give the customer the ability to kind of analyze which of their products, services, employees, and customers were helping profitability versus which ones weren't. So we built that, and, it got adopted in mass quickly when we started to release it. And then, the reason I said it's kind of an emotional story is things just kind of blew apart for that business unit. Our offering, which was the only one that shipped, was one of like 30 that were attached to this much larger $180 million project. And it got to the point where our project was the only project keeping that $180 million investment afloat. It was like the only reason. And we were just starting to get traction in the user base when the most senior leadership came in and said, this $180 million thing is done. We're not doing it anymore. And our little ship got sucked in with it. And it was interesting to watch. Scott Cook himself, the billionaire founder, who was no longer in a budgetary control position, was sitting there fighting passionately with Intuit's executive team, saying, this idea, he called it this. He said, this is the sexiest idea I've seen in 40 years, building this app for our customers. And he was like, we should keep it alive. But he didn't have control. And so the project got canceled. And I found myself, parting ways with Intuit at that point. And the guy who had taught me about, the concept of shared purpose, he and I were close friends by this time. And we ended up losing him. He ended up passing away very tragically within like the next year. Kind of out of a sense of duty that I felt to him and the discovery he made and how impactful it was. And out of a sense of duty I felt because of seeing how effective what we did on that project that otherwise failed, I started to lean into this idea of saying, I have some original ideas I want to put together that kind of show how to think systemically about what a customer wants to achieve, get a whole system of builders thinking about that and talking about that together so that you can build something meaningful. And I decided to call it the POV method within like a year of leaving into it. And it really kind of was a combination of two types of thinking. The first one is how to be very strategic and make sure that you keep orienting yourself to this outcome-based thinking. You know, how you doing on that? Like from 0 to 100, how would you score the team's ability doing that? I'm like, how do you get it up to like 80 to 100 most of the time? They're doing the right thing, and it's very strategic. And on the other axis, it's how do you get them aligned and to a state of shared purpose and an intelligent purpose on what that outcome is and the best way to achieve it. So it's like outcome and alignment to outcome. How do you achieve those? And so I started to come up with like, how do you come up with the outcomes and how do you achieve alignment to the outcomes? And what I found is that the best way to do that is to get the group working collectively as a human machine learner that is capable of coming up with a group point of view on what the outcome is, what the primary problem is in achieving the outcome, and the best way to upgrade the system to help with achieving the outcome more quickly. And I started experimenting with how to get a group informed and intelligent and able to articulate these kinds of strategies together and then own their execution together. And by the time I got to Infusionsoft, I had already kind of codified this into something of a method that I was thinking about how to execute. And Clay Mask told me when he hired me, he said, I want to see how I offer to you. He's like, I offer to you my product development environment as a place where you can experiment with this rollout that you want to do. And I got your back 100%. And so does the CTO, you know, and you come right in and you just roll this thing out. So we did that. I brought in the method. I actually licensed it to Infusionsoft, and it became like our annual priority and our number one strategic objective to get the method rolled out across the company. And it was a pretty transformative experience for the business. You know, the business when I came in was a great business, amazing business, you know, already at like 18 million in sales, like 30% per year growth, and flirting with profitability, although there was some cash burn. And the cash burn was getting kind of serious because relative to the amount of money they had left in the bank, you know, it was like 6 months of runway at the rate that they were coming in. And they were already trying to adjust with layoffs, and they were trying to adjust with financing, and things were kind of tight. Within 4 months of making it a goal to roll the method out across the company, where we said, hey, we've got to find the outcome the customer wants, but we got to also come up with something that keeps us making money. You know, like this thing we built's got to be a money maker. It can't be a money taker from our pockets. You know? This is not a charity. And the team needs to own this outcome. With about 4 months of rolling out this thinking, we went from a $500K a month cash burn to EBITDA profitable. 4 months. And the thing that made that happen was the company just started to realize, oh, wow, we need to charge more money up front to less customers rather than less money up front to more customers. And the ones that come in, we need to make the software easier for them. The ones that come in and actually pay the money up front, we got to give bias and preference to them in our development schedules. And the ones who've actually been in the ecosystem for a while and can teach us, we need to focus on them. And everybody else, we got to tune them out. We got to tune that noise out because we just can't, they can't help us. You know, they're not going to help the conversation. And when we did that, the company got dialed quickly on what I've now come to call the center of success. It's this center of your ecosystem of people that are really actually succeeding in achieving an outcome. And they have, this before they met you, before they had your solution, they already knew what this outcome was and they were working towards it. And they started to adopt the tool because they saw the tool as something that would really help them achieve this outcome. And in business, all the outcomes ladder up to save me time or make me more money, And so you could start there with your system and say, okay, at like the highest level, we want to save them time and make them more money if we're building business software. But, you can't take action on that. You can't go to the engineer team and say, okay, shiny red button. And every time I hit it, it saves me time and it makes me 10 times more money.
Hey, I just have to interrupt you there, Richard, for a moment. Staples made a lot of money off a very shiny red button that said, that was easy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's well said. That's maybe that's what happened. The engineers there were like, great, it'll sell well, I promise.
Exactly.
Put that thing on a shelf. Doesn't need to make a thing easy. All it just has to say is it makes it easy. Or that was easy. So the whole idea was, yes, it's true that people want to save time and make money, but it's not very useful to the engineering function to tell me that. So I need something true, but I also need something that's useful for planning my engineering work. So you have to come down the value chain, from the things that are still true into language that's more useful for building. And so we started messing around with these outcome statements, and at Infusionsoft, I had the team coming together, and we did 3,500 customer interviews in the 2.5 years that I was there. 3,500 customer interviews, because I had the team just calling again, and a larger and larger team just calling again and again and again to customers. We had about 6,000 customers when we started this, and I was like, I want to talk to most of them, and the more we talked and the more we processed, the more we found the customers saying to us, look, the outcome I'm trying to achieve is I'm trying to get my salespeople focused on hot leads that are likely to buy and likely to pay me in a way that makes me profitable. A hot lead is ready to buy and profitable, a profitable deal. And I'm trying to get my salespeople focused on that. And where I'm losing is I'm handing these lists of leads that are so unqualified to my salespeople, and they're spending all their time filtering through the hay to find a needle. And it's just a big waste of their time and my money. And so can you help me? Can you help me focus my team? And Infusionsoft's engineers, if you'd asked them before we involved them in iPod to GPOV, what's the outcome the customers value? They would have said things that they read in the marketing. We'll double your sales, or automate your process. And you can automate any process. And that's one of the great things about Infusionsoft. So automatable. And we're just so great at saying, hey, everything's automatable. You want us to vacuum the floor. Shit, we can automate that too. And it was like this automation suite. But once the engineers started to understand that amongst all the automation options that were offered by the Intuit platform, there was one that was most valuable to the customers, and that was getting the salespeople focused on hot leads. Once they understood that, it changed their thinking from how to expand and broaden the automation suite into how to use the automation suite and make it easier to accomplish the goal of getting salespeople hotter leads. And once that team started to understand that objective, it changed the way they were thinking about their building and their designing. The thing that really helped after that, once we had a clear outcome, was I remember showing up to work one day with the team. This really pissed off the board, by the way. The senior most board member was really upset with me when she heard I did this. I took the entire engineering team and I said, look, today we're all going to go lock ourselves in a room and we're going to print off page by page every single page of the app that the customer has to go through to achieve this outcome. of getting a qualified lead into the hands of a salesperson. And I remember one of the engineers at the back goes, "Can I play that back? You're saying you want to actually go step by step through every page?" I said, "Yep." And he says, "Well, that's going to take," I said, "I expect days. I'm thinking like the next 3 days, we're probably going to be in this room for 10 hours, guys. And I am bringing breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So settle in. This is the job for the next 3 days." And I remember, 2 or 3 of the engineers just looked downright hostile, like they were just like, how do we get rid of this? But most of the team, I think, was mostly just in a state of like, wait, can you do that? And I remember the guy who was the VP of product before I joined was the founder of the company, Scott Martineau. And I remember Scott coming in and looking at me and going, "You can do that? Like, that's okay?" And I was like, we're the exec team, man. We can make it up. Let's do it. So it was painstaking, man. I'm telling you, they were like, "Well, what do we do?" I said, "Well, I guess we need a printer. Like, somebody go get a printer and bring it in here and get it plugged in." So we worked through all that, and then we had breakfast, and then we just started printing it off. And I'm going to tell you this, by the end of those 3 days, the engineering team was sitting there in the room, and they were just looking around, and we had covered 3 walls of this office. And we diagrammed all these steps. And it was the first time they'd seen the full breadth of the complexity that a user has to go through, and the amount of skill the user has to acquire, and the amount of vocabulary the user has to acquire to be able to effectively get Infusionsoft to help them with the goal. And it was the first time they'd comprehended it that way. And it was such a clarifying moment for them. And that was the right time to, and then I thought, okay, great. So you guys can now see the current reality, you can see the current reality that the customer has to go through after they buy and try to get to their outcome, the buy to outcome journey, the heroic odyssey they have to go through to get there. Now that you can see that, I want to do another cycle of, collective machine learning processing, where we come up with a similar point of view, a group point of view on where is this most problematic, and I want to crisp up our definition of what this problem is. So with Infusionsoft, we came up with, in the pursuit of this goal of getting a salesperson a hot lead, the customer has to come in and basically learn the instrument of Infusionsoft, which is essentially kind of a programming interface, And, these people aren't programmers, and they don't understand the instrument, and they don't understand half the terminology we introduce them to, and that's why they just get stopped. So how do we get them to the outcome without requiring them to think like programmers and acquire a whole new design, vocabulary and conceptual toolkit? And when the engineers were asked that question, there was an amazing thing that happened. It's like we tapped into their creative soul, their maker energy. And once they'd seen the problem framed that well, they couldn't stop themselves from thinking about how to make something better. Their mind just naturally kicked in to coming up with ideas. And this is the point in my career where I realized you don't go to engineers and give them requirements. Instead, you go to engineers and you give them an outcome that you're trying to achieve and the things that are getting in the way of that outcome. And you let them help contribute to the definition of that thinking so that they can recognize it as their own. And once that happens, that's the birthplace of shared purpose on a team. They all start to have a similar insight that they all start to share. And that's where you tap into the right strategy that has the highest level of alignment. And now you're like in Michael Jordan zone. The team just starts doing these pretty dunks, like one after another, smash, just like one after another, flying through the air, with grace. and they're giving each other these incredible assists. And so I started to roll that out on that project. And I initially, Clayton, when I first showed up, he was like, man, we just can't get the right software out the door. Within like 6 months, he was like, now that is what we need more of. And I need more of it more often. And then we had releases coming out once every quarter. And then we had 9 teams that were working together in sync with each other towards this outcome. And Infusionsoft went from 18 million to 60 million 2.5 years. And in that period of growth, and we did it while trending near the profitability line. And that kind of growth just caused the company to explode, launched way past 100 million from that initial propulsion, and also attracted 110 million of capital investment from Goldman Sachs and Bain Capital. And, it was like rarefied air. All of a sudden we were just flying in spaces that, it became rare that I could talk to anybody who even knew what we were talking about. It was like I could only talk to SaaS execs at like $50 million companies who've done that climb to find people who could relate to it. It was like taking a trip to space, and it was just going so fast. So when we took the Series C round, I decided I wanted to take this approach that I'd been working on that I just seen succeed so well. I wanted to start curating it and developing it more. And, we also kind of solved the core growth challenge that Infusionsoft had faced for a while. So I earned like what I'd come there to earn. And so I was like, we decided let's part ways. And I went to building an ecosystem around how to develop software this way. And it's a small ecosystem. I didn't want to go down the over consumery, super simplified, write a book, start a community, get everybody in there, making money. That wasn't my goal at first. My goal was to curate a community of people who would practice this like you could practice yoga, or the way jazz artists practice playing their instruments. And that community over time would grow, organically. And so for the last, 8 years, I've been working on growing that community, and we've served a little more than 40 software companies in that period. And we typically go in and work with them to help them understand how to do this type of thinking, where you start with understanding the market, you start with understanding the outcome the market really wants, and then you start holding your solutionizing to that standard. And the way you get your solutionizing to that standard is you give the solution builders the responsibility of coming up with that strategic clarity together and defining it together and researching it together and pivoting together. And that togetherness, that shared purpose, is what makes the thing fly. And we've just watched transformative success after transformative success. I think in total, there's been hundreds of projects we've worked on with all those companies. And it's gotten to the point where success has become the norm. So now in the case of Window Book, we have this opportunity when we came together, where you've got this amazingly complex and historically rich ecosystem of mailers and mail service providers working in the ecosystem of the United States Postal Service. This long and illustrious history, one of the only federal organizations that was written into the Constitution, and has, just these long-standing systems. And if you think about it, it's really quite a marvel that there's an organization that actually can touch every business and every residence physically every single day of the week, and provide something to them, and the logistic complexity of that whole system. And it's been massively disrupted through the years by electronic mail, by carriers of different varieties that basically offer competitive services. But it's still there. It's very much still there. There's 80 billion in postage that gets paid per year, and there's nearly a $2 trillion amount of business that flows through this system every year. And so, it's an ocean of economic activity. And this idea of what is who is the center of this market? Where's the center of this market's success? What are they reaching for? And where is it hard for them? Was the kind of thinking we started doing at Window Book about a year ago. And, Jeff, you're the one who first said to me, well, there's this new thing going on. It's been around for a while, but it's like starting to really come into focus, seamless acceptance. And really what it is it's the Postal Service saying we are upgrading the IT infrastructure of our whole logistical system to something that's more electronic and more automated. And if you want to keep shipping with us at these preferred rates of postage, you have to upgrade to these standards. And if you don't upgrade to these standards, you're going to see your postage go up. You're going to end up paying more. You're going to pay fees. And seamless acceptance is the name of this system. And so we went in and we started to realize this is a requirement. This is a forced upgrade. If you want to maintain or improve your profitability, you got to make this upgrade. If you don't, it's going to hurt your cash and it could be fatal. So we started looking at that and saying, okay, well, if getting to the seamless acceptance, full seamless acceptance is the thing that mail service providers as a whole are saying, hey, that's my outcome right now. I got to get to seamless acceptance because I'm going to save more time and make more money once I've upgraded to that. And I'm going to lose time and I'm going to pay more money if I don't do this. So I'm leaning into this. Started saying, okay, well, what's the reality of getting there? What's the path they have to walk to get there? And what are the big problems that get in the way of getting there? And Lloyd Moss was the first one who said to me, I think what you're going to find is these undocumented mail pieces are a real problem for a lot of people. And they're going to see how, undocumented mail, once they're in a full seamless acceptance state and they're getting real assessments, undocumented mail is creating huge fines that are material for the company, jarring, like getting hit with an asteroid jarring. And people can see through their kind of scoreboard right now, once they're in seamless parallel, they can see what they would be getting assessed, if they were in full seamless, and the numbers aren't pretty. And so we went out and started talking to Window Book customers primarily, also some subject matter experts in the Postal Service. And we started saying, hey, we didn't go to them and say, are you having problems with undocumented mail? We went to them and said, are you trying to go full seamless? Yes. Are you having any issues with like assessments? Yes. What are those? Undocumented mail pieces. We just started hearing that again and again. And after we heard it like 10 times, we started going to people and saying, are you having challenges with undocumented mail piece assessments? And the answer was yes. Now, I will say that we encountered a few people who didn't say yes, who said, nope, got it handled. But when I asked them, well, how did you do that? Is it that you do? One of them said, we don't really even have the problem. We run such a routine cycle and it's such a low complexity, same thing every time. We just never get hit with those. There was one person who said, no, actually, I do every kind of job. We do all the jobs, big, small, medium, all kinds of complexity. And we work with comminglers. And we do all of that. And I still got it handled. And I don't need any tool. And I was like, how'd you do that? And what I find out is this person is an inventor who has his own system that he's built for his company. And to that, and he's like, so I got it handled. I was like, yeah, but at what expense, man? Like you're in the software business and you got a customer of one. And that system has to be upgraded and maintained and evolved and changed on a continual basis. And you're spending a lot of time doing that. You're spending a lot of money doing that. And if you really add it up and you're honest with yourself, what I'm going to charge you for a product that does that and more, and you can just keep telling me what to do more of, and I'll keep building more of that. What I'm going to charge you for that is cheaper than what you're spending right now to build and maintain your system, But that was like, those were exceptional conversations. People saying, I don't have any problems with undocumented mail, either because A, I just don't have the process complexity that creates the problem, or B, because I have a system I've already designed. I talked to another customer who said, yeah, I have a system that we've designed. Yeah, I've got a software programmer who's actually working for the company. And yeah, they're building this system. And I'm in terror every day of losing this company, losing this person. Like, what if the software engineer gets a job offer and walks out the door? I'm totally screwed. I don't have anybody who knows how to do what this person does, you know? And I'm not even sure how to hire another one. And I would really love to not be in that business. I would really love to be more in my focused business, which is doing more jobs for higher margins rather than building more complexity into my own systems for customer fulfillment. And so, but the majority of the people that we talked to were like, yeah, have the problem. Yeah, making me nervous. One customer said, you know what I'd like for you guys to build? What's that? A paranoia reducer. You know, like when I got that assessment email and I read it the first time, you know, it's like getting an IRS audit, you know, with the amount included right at the list top. You know, it's like, whoa, you know, I'm in trouble. And there was this feeling of I've got to go and do, you know, multiple rounds of investigation because I don't know what caused this. And, you know, one customer I talked to was like, took us 3 months to figure out what was the cause of this assessment that was supposedly going to cost us 300 grand. And when by like 80 days in, we still hadn't identified what the problem was and we weren't willing to pay the increased postage, it led to this conversation where the Postal Service was saying, you owe us this money, and if you don't pay this money, we're going to revoke your ability to do business with us. And there was like this white knuckle experience. And then finally, this person was able to find what caused it, able to come back to the Postal Service and able to effectively document for the Postal Service, here's why I don't owe you 300 grand. And I was like, what was that like when you went through that? Well, that was really, you know, I got it done. I got it handled. It's handled. But that was a rough patch of water, you know? And I worry about that happening. That same customer told me, hey, you know, and I run this one office. My company has several more, and I'm the best one at process, which means these other ones, if they got hit with the same challenge, probably wouldn't fare as well. And any one of them failing can create complications with our entire organization when it comes to doing business with the Postal Service, you know? So when I started to hear that, I was like, this is a real problem. This is a very real problem. So we started to take the problem of undocumented mail and we started to ask ourselves the question, you know, what's the outcome? Well, I want to get into full seamless, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't, you know, just bankrupt my business. I want to find a way to fix my processes so that I don't have undocumented mail, you know, or so that I don't run into these problems in the first place. So we said, okay, well, if that's the outcome, if that's the goal, to essentially reduce the threat of undocumented mail from a crisis state to what feels like a very manageable state, then where's that problematic? Where's the problems? And this is another important step in my method, because it's very natural once you have the outcome to start jumping to the solution and saying, okay, let's start talking about what to build. But if you don't take time to ask what's the problem that the customer is experiencing, if you don't build shared purpose around that, then the conversation about what to build starts to fall apart under its own complexity. But if you can say, you know, here's what the problem really is in trying to achieve this outcome, then you can say, okay, I have a much, much more clear target to aim at, and I have a much better aiming apparatus for hitting my target than this kind of buckshot, let's all just talk about what to build. And, you know, have you ever seen this? You know, you get a bunch of builders talking about what to build, and pretty soon they've completely lost sight of what the end goal is. And now they're in this really cool conversation about engineering fundamentals and the right way to do things. And it's so easy to lose the topic of what's the right thing to do. And it's so ironic because you lose that topic as you're talking about the right way to do things. But the right way to do things and which things to do are two separate subjects. Yeah. And so you lose this right thing to do as you're having this conversation about how to do things right. And everybody's immersed in this how to do things right conversation. And there's so much passion, there's so much work, so much energy that gets wasted there. So it's like, how do you get that energy producing the outcome you want? You get the team focused on the problem. So as we looked at the problem for undocumented mail, the first thing we thought was, they're just really having a hard time figuring out the first step to take. They're like, I want to apply effort towards solving this problem, but I don't know how to organize my effort. I'm flying blind. Don't even know where to look. I'm not clear on what the regulations are. I'm not clear on what caused this. I'm not clear on where in my processes things went wrong. Help me organize the effort I'm about to apply. That's like what we started to come up with. So what that led to was this idea that it would be helpful to give them like an incident management tool where every time they get an assessment or every time they have some sort of known undocumented mail that they're about to present to the US Postal Service, it's something that helps them either A, troubleshoot what might have caused the assessment in a helpful way, or B, capture that undocumented log of known problems as a way to produce organization of their efforts towards achieving the outcome of fixing their process so that they don't lose their preferred postage rates, and so that they stay at the lowest postage possible. And the team started iterating, and we had more conversations with customers. We have more conversations with window book employees. We made several fundamental changes and pivots. There were multiple times where you, Jeff, came in and said, I think it should do this. And that became something we ended up doing. Multiple times where Steve came in and said, it's got to do this. I'm telling you right now, I understand this problem. It has to do this. That's really the outcome. That's actually how the known undocumented mail log came to be. Was we were building the troubleshooting piece, and then Steve came in and said, look, this is what they really are going to value as well. And now we understand why. Because as you start to capture these known undocumented submissions you're making to the Postal Service, you can start to see where your process is getting broken. You start to get out ahead of what's going to drive the assessments you get. And it gives you a comprehensive understanding of where you start to have your process problems. So you can really organize your efforts to make sure that you eliminate the process problems. And he was like, those two need to work hand in hand. So that's what the tool does. It gives you the ability to capture your known undocumented mail pieces as you're submitting jobs to the Postal Service. And then when you start to get your assessment letters, it helps you troubleshoot what the cause is. And there's actually a pretty good logical tree of triggers, things that trigger an assessment, what their root causes are, and like what those error categories are. And you can start to say, okay, these are the categories of the errors. These are what cause the errors within these categories. And here's like the trigger, and here's the path to resolution. Here's what you probably need to investigate now. You need to fix your process. You probably do owe some postage, or no, you actually don't owe postage. You just needed to, there was just this fail somewhere in the system, and you need to go show that to the Postal Service that this fail happened and that you don't owe them more money. And by giving them that guidance, and then we when we came up with these designs, when we came up with these ideas, we didn't just rush into building them. We drew them up in prototypes, and then we took them to the customers that we'd researched initially, and we showed them that stuff. And we said, does this look good? Would you use this? Is this something you want? And we were getting validation from them along the way. And they were helping validate where we were going. And finally, once we had such a clear picture of what to get built, the engineering team just flew like a pack of birds in terms of getting it built. And like most software that gets built this way, we've now, it's quite a thing to, show up with a piece of demoable software and, in just a couple, 2-3 months time, and bring a group of users who are very technical and very skillful together and just create accounts for all of them right there in a live setting in a piece of software that's not even in production yet. And the thing stands up, it doesn't like crash or fail. And people log in, and then you get a power user, someone, you think about some of these people who've jumped in there and immediately used this. These are companies that really have dealt with this. One of the people that's in there got an assessment for 1.4 million pieces of mail one week. and I remember asking her, did that like create any kind of chaos inside? Like, did you lose sales and service and focus for the couple of weeks where you're figuring that? And I remember her look on her face. She's like, oh, I just don't even want to think about that. Like she was just like, oh my gosh. So to have someone who has that level of, and yet they resolved it, someone with that level of skill, that level of understanding, jump in and just power use the tool and generate all this great feedback and say, yeah, I'm going to use this. That's the kind of success we're looking for. We create a win, we're not just, I know we sound really articulate when we talk. And I know sometimes that sounds like salesy language, but really that's not what we're going for. What we're going for is a higher articulation of the goal, a higher articulation of the problem, which leads to a higher execution of the solution. And we really earn it the right way. We show up to the market and we say, here's what we built, custom crafted for the majority of you who need help with this. And here's why it's valuable, because we are calculably saving you time, energy, money, because the company's paying for your man hours. We are saving you that while helping you zero in on how to get the most favorable rates and, not pay these assessment fees. So our goal now, is to roll this out and be leaders in resolving this problem. Our point of view is that mail service providers and the United States Postal Service are in a state of demonstrable dispute over the question of undocumented mail pieces. And we want to step in and help mediate the conversation and help drive a strong, clear identification of how to avoid these problems. And my experience with the Postal Service, as I've talked with them about this, is that they are just as eager as everyone else to help everyone avoid and address this issue. They want to get the real thing they're aiming for is getting the system upgraded to a more automated, efficient electronic system. And, they want to help people address these undocumented mail pieces. I've heard countless stories now of customers who talk about, I got on the phone with this person from the United States Postal Service, and they literally just walked with me step by step through the path to resolution, and we got this addressed. And so there's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of effort to reach across the aisle and help each other out and figure this out. And WindowBook is helping lead the way. And it's fitting that WindowBook does this because, WindowBook is, under your leadership, Jeff, has been serving this industry for more than 30 years.
One of the things I do love is seeing both engineering and product leadership and clients get on calls and honestly learn from each other. It's like, oh, okay, how can we do that? And they love the fact that we're implementing some of their suggestions, and we love the fact that they have a unique point of view that may not be exactly the way that another client's point of view is and what they want, but through many clients and working with many clients, we get something that's better and better, and it's a system that I really appreciate, as opposed to the traditional just looking at the overall market, not digging in with a unique client and really understanding their business at the deep level. So and having it so that the engineers actually can listen to the comments goes back to what you're saying over at Infusionsoft. And
Yeah, and I think one of the problems that we have, I mean, like you think about these last 200 years, we've 10x the number of people on the planet, and went through the Industrial Revolution and learned how to produce everything in factories. And in factories, the most technical and skillful workers are the most siloed. They work on their widget per man hour thing, and it's an assembly line, where each step of the assembly line, people have their very specialized expertise, and they don't really understand how to do the stuff upstream or downstream from them. They know how to do what they do. And it's like that thinking of assembly line mentality got transposed accidentally on the software world. So that engineers weren't getting treated like makers, creators. They were instead getting treated like assembly line workers who were just expected to crank a widget per man hour. And Agile has kind of aligned itself to that and said, okay, fine. You guys just got to be clear about what you want every 2 weeks, and we'll only build that. But when you get behind closed doors and you talk to the engineers, what you find is this group of people that are like all makers, they are inherently creative. They love to imagine. They love to invent what they imagine. They experience intrinsic fulfillment from that. That's why they became builders, makers. And they feel underutilized and bored by most of the work they're doing for their company. But when you tap into their real creative genius and you make them peer collaborators in the creative process, it unleashes their real creative energy. And they love it. They just love it. I've heard again and again and again and again and again and again and again from so many engineers, oh, this is the funnest work I've ever done. like I'm literally just having a blast. Like this has been one of the funnest projects of my career. And everything seems so clear, and we have such alignment, and we're playing such a great team sport, and the customers are happy, and I can see the value in what I'm doing. It makes sense to me. I love it. And what it always spreads. The other engineering teams start looking at it and going, now that looks fun. I want to work on that too, and that's what we've been trying to do. We're trying to build this community and get this group larger and larger, get the conversation going more and more. And I want to thank you, Jeff. You've been one of the most supportive CEOs in that whole tribe that I've worked with. I've worked with so many great CEOs, but you've just been one of the most steady, staunch allies walking alongside this movement and very determined to roll it out inside your company and your industry, which, is an industry that has steadily moved, kind of like at a glacial pace. It's this huge, big thing, and it shifts and it's got all these patterns, but we're now jumping in and doing a very, kind of a big thought leadership move in the space. And I think, Windowbook is the right company to lead this, because the whole Windowbook team is literally just people who've spent these last few decades thinking about what's the core value, that you talk about with customers at Windowbook.
Yeah, we call our clients because we want to care and protect for them. And we've done that for many years. And a lot of times people don't actually have the time and money to invest in going to all of the MTAC meetings, the DTAC meetings, all of the research that needs to be going on from what's happening from a regulatory point of view, but also it's very difficult to know, even if you're trying to develop your own software, everything that's going on in the industry. So by you leading a team and going and interviewing client after client after client, we get to understand how those regulatory issues are affecting them. We can advise them about some of the things that are coming down the pike, but how they're solving it. And then what I'm seeing here that I really like is the interaction, so we can care and protect for them, and we can integrate by utilizing their needs into our software development process.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing, and it's leading the way. It's leading the way, This is something where there was some leadership necessary, and Windowbook is creating that leadership. And our intention, of course, is there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mail service providers out there, and there's, many, 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 many more mailers that are grappling with this issue. And our goal is to become the trusted partner in intelligent mail assessment management. That's our larger goal here, as you're moving into intelligent mail and you're dealing with the issue of assessments. WindowBook is leading the way on helping companies understand and organize their efforts towards that. And, I don't like to spin futures. Everything we've discussed up to this point is something we actually have in beta right now. It's a system that's getting tested by our customers right now, and we're just about to release it. But of course, a roadmap is emerging, and we are continuing our investment towards this end. And there's some very exciting stuff that we're starting to talk about in terms of being able to even more thoughtfully use data that gets generated, throughout the system, generating mail and presenting it to the U.S. Postal Service. We're thinking of data that gets generated throughout that process by our products and by the Postal Service and other people that we can use to make this even more efficient and even more. Get a grip on this thing. Our goal is to take this from a state of turbulence and paranoia to a state of manageability. And we're doing this when we meet people who are already succeeding at that. We don't look at them and say, "Oh, dang it, you should switch to us." Actually, what we say is, "How'd you do that?" Show us that trick. And those folks have become our greatest and some of our most trusted advisors. They've been there at critical checkpoints. And it's funny because initially it was kind of like, "Wow, we'll see if you guys can even build something," And then it got to the point where the tool's pretty good, and they're looking at it and saying, "Okay." And I'm pretty sure that a couple of the most skillful ones who've been advising us have logged into the tool and are playing with it. There's interest. They're like, "Okay, well, maybe this might actually have some value for me." And there's definitely a large group of people who now are in there and going, "Wow, now this." The other day, one of the customers yelled at Nate, our project lead. He yelled at him, "Now this needs to happen." He saw the tool and he said that. This needs to happen. And we know we're winning and doing the right thing, hopefully, when people start. My favorite part is when customers start coming up and going, "It's like you read my mind." Like you, and what I love to say to them when we did that is, "Well, we didn't read your mind, but we talked to you, we listened to you. We comprehended your challenge." And so few software projects, not through the fault of the engineers or the fault of anybody really, remember, when I told the story about how I worked, all these ideas about how to think about the customer journey and the customer experience and the outcome were very foreign to me. It was like discovering a whole new culture that I just didn't understand, and I didn't know what they ate, and I didn't understand how they talked, and there was time that my brain needed to grow like new synapses that were capable of comprehending this new phenomenon. And for a lot of software companies, that's the problem. They just haven't thought about how to do this yet. But when you do get everyone thinking that way, then the team starts actually holding themselves accountable. One of my favorite analogies that I like to use is the idea that, the company starts building out all these capabilities, new capabilities, new capabilities, new capabilities. And you could think of those as like the company stocking those abilities the way like a deli would stock meats and cheeses. And over time, the number of cheeses and the number of meats just keeps growing, And then the engineering team starts thinking about things like spoilage. Like, did you know 60% of our cheese is going bad before we sell it, and how do we maintain refrigeration? And should we add freezing, and blah, blah, blah. And, do we need more space and dimension? And everybody's stuck over there thinking, but what if you go in and you do some conversations with the customers and you don't ask, what cheese do you want? You don't ask, what meat do you want? You ask, what are you doing after you buy our meat and our cheese? What's going on? And let's say you find out that 70% of the people that are coming to your deli counter are buying cured meats from this one manufacturer that's local, that makes like the best meats. and cheeses from another local manufacturer, and they're putting them together with a baguette they're buying from the store next door. And then they're going to the store after that and buying a little picnic basket and a red checkered cloth. And they're walking around the corner and sitting down in the beautiful park nearby and having a picnic lunch. What if you find that's what 70% of them are doing? Well, then all of a sudden you realize you're in the picnic business. You're not in the deli counter making business. You know, you can probably de-scope a lot of that inventory and say, actually, we're getting out of that. And you can warm up the relationships with those two suppliers and say, I want more of your products. And you can start to stock picnic baskets and checkered cloths. And you can even go ahead and throw a nice park right in the middle of your operation. And, you know, you're basically the food vendor for the park crowd. And then you're making a ton of money and you're making a lot of people very, very happy. That's kind of our thinking here. We want to, as we've comprehended the mail service provider experience, we've realized it's not just pre-sort, it's not just post pre-sort, it's not just the physical chain of custody and how the digital chain of custody work, you know, and it's not just working with comminglers and trying to figure out, you know, what kind of file structure you're using. It's not all that technicality. People are trying to get into intelligent mail without getting hammered by assessments. That's like what's on everyone's mind right now. And that means upgrading their processes. And we want to give them, that's where we see our opportunity now, is helping them manage that process, broker that process, communicate more effectively with the Postal Service, and really get a grip on it. And that's the equivalent of our picnic, you know? And so we're turning Window Book into a company that's helping with that. And of course, we also provide significant software offerings that assist in the management of the physical and digital chains of custody, in producing your mail.gats and getting them ready to go to the Postal Service, and, you know, finding where they have, you know, discrepancies between the physical and digital and getting those fixed in a post pre-sort. That's really where we've led the way. And that's where we've done a lot of our best work. And it's also what's helped us develop the expertise and awareness of how to actually address these problems with undocumented mail pieces and with assessments. We've got a lot of tribal knowledge about how to do that, and we know how to have good conversations with customers about how to do that. So, you know, this is what we're doing now, and I'm excited. This summer I think is going to be great. What were you going to say, Jeff?
I was wondering if you could just speak. You talked about listening, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about creative listening, because a lot of clients, they don't always know exactly how to articulate something. And one of the things that I've been observing is a great way to get people to articulate and help them. I don't know if you can speak any to that.
Yeah, you bet. I invented this concept called creative listening, and I've been talking about it that way for you know, like 15 years now. And the reason I called it creative listening, or listening to creatively assist, is because, you know, there's two other types of listening that we do, at least. One you could call is listening to respond. And this is like probably 90% of the listening we do. We're hearing the other person's talking only in as much as it reveals to us where there's an opening in it so that we can assert our point of view. And that's kind of like the default communication style for a lot of people. And it's not intended to be rude. It's just what they are familiar with. And so the conversation has kind of a diplomatic adversarialism to it, where, you know, you've got what you want, I got what I want. We're kind of like in this, you know, lion's dance with each other, who's going to win. And what's interesting about it is, because you're spending most of your time listening for your opening, you're actually not applying most of your cognitive cycles to understanding what the other person is saying. So the likelihood that you are misperceiving what they're saying is quite high. And there's data that really underscores this that I find very compelling. There's a marriage scientist named Well, he's really a data scientist who studies data about marriage. And his name is John Gottman. Malcolm Gladwell writes about him in his books. He's a PhD up at University of Washington. He runs these clinics where he gets married couples together and just records all their interactions in really exhaustive ways for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And he's done this with thousands of couples now. And out of that data, he's done scientific studies, that have spanned decades now, that show why these marriages are succeeding or failing, where things are breaking down. And one of the most critical insights that he showed is that in like 75% of disputes that happen between partners, the cause of the dispute really and truly is a misperception. I think you're saying A, and I'm treating you like you're saying A. I don't realize you're actually saying B. And what's ironic is I'm trying to articulate B to you. And you and I actually share B, but I think you're A. And you're kind of pissed at the way I'm talking to you. And we're just having this kind of terrible time. And I'm not understanding you and you're not understanding me. So what fixes that is the second kind of listening to understand. So this is where I'm not trying to listen for an opportunity to respond. I'm actually listening to just hear what you're saying. And I check whether or not I heard what you're saying by doing a playback to you, where I say, here's what I think I just heard you say. And that gives you the opportunity to say, yes, that's what I said. I feel understood. Or no, that's actually not what I said. Which makes me go, oh, I guess I'm not hearing you. Yeah, you're not. Here's what I'm trying to say. And you can kind of keep cycling that way until you get to the point where the other person's going, yes, that's what I'm saying. Now, what I noticed, and the reason I created creative listening, is because as you go through that back and forth, the person starts revising what they're saying. And not just revising, but they start improvising what they're saying. They're kind of like, well, now that I think about this and now that I've verbally processed this a little bit, let me try this out. I am saying this. And you're like, you're saying this? And they're like, yeah, that. And then there's this back and forth that happens where really what you're doing is you're adding auxiliary cognitive power to their talk, think cycle. And it's towards the service of them articulating a realization that they're having. So I call a point of view, a POV, an evolving realization. And it runs about 20 feet out in front of what I'm talking and thinking about. And when I work with another person who's helping me creatively, and I'm also listening to them creatively, I accelerate the speed I close the distance between what I'm talking and thinking about and what I'm realizing. I get to the place where I can actually realize what I'm saying, and I can actualize my thinking. And this concept is intuitive to makers. Makers, when I talk this way to them, they say, you're articulating something I experience all the time, but I've never actually articulated, And one of the things that's exciting to me, Jeff, is that, I'm a musical person and I hear music in everything. And my mother believes the universe was made of music, and I am inclined to agree with her. And, there's music everywhere. And music is so lovely. And who doesn't love music? And music focuses on harmonies and has such beautiful systems thinking in it. And in jazz and in hip hop and R&B, which are my preferred styles of music to practice, there's these cultures of supporting improvisation, where each person has something that they're talking about basically as they're playing, they're playing a song, but really what they want to do is they want to get into that improvisational flow state where they're making something up in real time. And it's the best thing they've ever made up, but they didn't actually plan it. It just grew out of them. There's this realization of the dream and the reality join. You have front row seats to it, and yet you are it. And it's this peaceful state people write about from flow. But the way you get there in these jazz settings is your bandmates play in a way that's designed to support you in achieving your flow state. And then you take turns. and it's another person's turn. And now everybody plays to support that person achieving the flow state. And as you pass the buck around like that, they've got these models for doing it. And what happens, man, is the music gets groovy. It gets good. I've got the greatest picture I want to show you. This is like something I'm very proud of. As you know, I go to jazz jams every Wednesday, and I sing with these jazz artists. And I have this picture of these jazz artists who I was singing with the other day. And this is and they were comping me. I was soloing and I was kind of scatting. For a vocalist, the way you scat with your instrument, the way you improvise with your instrument is you just make up sounds. So I was like, da 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 da, da ba da 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 da. And I was just kind of like messing around with that idea. And while I was doing it, the musicians behind me were comping me, and I could hear their music, and it was inspiring my creativity. And the guy who runs the jam snapped this photo, and I want you to just see this is the whole photo right here. Can you see that?
Yes.
So that's me singing, right? But what I love is when you zoom in, look at the looks on the faces of the bassist and the guitarist.
Yeah. They're enjoying.
And those guys are helping me flow.
Yeah.
I was getting to an improvisational state and they were comping me.
Yeah.
And that's how jazz musicians try to do it. They support each other. And I thought to myself, when I saw that, I was like, what a brilliant execution of an idea I've been trying to build systems for too. And I started to, I almost changed my name. I said, this is no longer the POV method, it's the jam method. We're going to jam, But my clients love the idea of POV, and they just keep saying it. So I decided let's keep with the POV method, but we still have jamming. Jamming is this core construct. Jamming is a group-based form of creative listening where you're helping people attain these great improvisational expressions. So, what does jamming with a customer look like? Well, if I go to the customer, I'll typically ask a question like this. I'll say, hey, you bought our software, you're using it in a lot of ways. If you had to kind of sum up, what's the outcome we're helping you achieve? What would you say? Now, usually when you ask a customer that, they have kind of their, default answers that they just come up with. And those answers are summarized and often not very helpful to us in terms of helping us figure out what we need to build. So when we hear them offer those answers, we'll do a playback, say, okay, what I heard you say is you use Window Book to improve the efficiency of, managing your communications with the United States Postal Service about your mail.dat file and making corrections to your mail.dat file, like post pre-sort. And I hear you saying that. And what is, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And you try to get them to start telling you the stories of, jobs they do to that effect. And then you start asking, hey, where's the complication? Where's the pain? Where's the challenge in that? And as they talk about it more and more, it's like they're learning to think systemically themselves. They're verbally processing it themselves, and they're starting to get to clarity. The most common thing in the world for a human being is that we're immersed in a system that we haven't yet really comprehended or thought about. And we're just kind of doing our thing within it. It's like it's like saying, well, no, back up a little bit and take a look at it. Let's do a 10,000 foot view of what you're doing. And for a lot of them, this is the first time they've had those epiphanies. And when they start to have those epiphanies, it leads to clarity, realization, articulation, and you can see them light up. Yeah, that's it. That is it. That's what I value about you guys. You said it better than I said it myself. And the way they get there is you're comping them like a jazz musician does. They're building their idea and you're providing creative support and horsepower. But they're in control of where the idea is going. And I'll tell you, when people feel heard in this way and assisted in this way, it leads to the, a bunch of dorky smiles, Everybody's starting to feel pretty good. And that's another big part of shared purpose, by the way. Shared purpose is not just logical unity or ideological unity. There's a growth of goodwill, real goodwill. I like being around this team. When I'm with these folks, I feel heard and respected and valued, and I have opportunities to self-actualize, with my ideas. And you start to get a community functioning that way, and my goodness, it just becomes, there's nothing we can't do. There's no problem we can't solve with this kind of power, this kind of collective creative human intelligence. I once thought to call it chi, collective creative human intelligence. And I remember talking once with somebody about that. And I said, yeah, it's called chi. Haven't you heard of chi? And she's like, yeah, you mean the Asian concept, the energy that animates and gives life to the body. And I was like, no, I'm talking about collective creative human intelligence, chi. And they were like, well, that term's already pretty popular, man. And I was like, yeah, but they're kind of the same because it really is the thing that animates the body of the team. Anyway, collective creative human intelligence, that's the thing that is fun, engaging, valuable. It's all the good things. It's all the good things. Yeah.
Winterbook, we say one of our core values is collaboration beats competition, because we all work together, and you may have a particular point of view, and one of the things I like about creative listening, it's trying to influence people to get clarity, as opposed to going a particular direction. And this isn't about getting them to go a particular direction other than to get clear as to what they want to say. And I think that has such value for all of us, because it doesn't help us to move somebody towards a direction that isn't the core issue, because we want to build the software for the core issue that really needs to be solved by them and by others. And a software company is really sharing the cost of development over a wider and wider group of people. So if you can understand that group of people really well, and you can get them to articulate their challenges really well, everybody in the group does better.
Yeah, my son's working at a pizza shop right now. And, sometimes you get people in these entry-level jobs and they think my job is to, wash the dishes, or my job is to mop the floor. And the problem with my job is it quickly leads to the opposite, which is my job is not to do those things.
Right.
And I told him, I said, don't think that way. Think like the owner of the store. Like when you're working there, ask yourself, what's the owner trying to do? And how are we going to make good pizza deliciously for customers in a way that produces profitability for the business? And how are we to make sure the customers are having a great experience? And so if there's a pile of shit on the floor over there, like detritus and straws and something like that, somebody made a mess, don't think my job is to run the cashier, or my job is to, wipe down the counter. Go clean up the mess. Just walk over there and sweep it up. And if you and everybody else on the team starts to take this position of ownership, here's the interesting thing. For a long time, I think this idea of I don't want to do that, I'm not going to take the kind of ownership because I really don't get the spoils of the profits of the business. That idea, I think, has met its match, because the truth is, for makers, money's not a big motivator. If you get into the life of most makers, you're going to find even the ones that have large sums of money are living quite simply consumption kind of gets in the way of their creativity. And so they don't spend a lot of time doing it. They spend a lot of their time making things. They spend a lot of their time being very creative. And creative people love to get closer to the ownership of their creative process because it's very closely related to their own self-actualization. They love to feel a sense of ownership in it. So companies that give them a place where they can feel that sense of ownership as part of their job are places where they prefer to work, and they like it, and they're having fun with it. And as long as they're being paid a fair and competitive wage, they're not sitting there saying, wait a minute, why would I think like an owner if I'm not going to get paid the owner's capital? If I'm not going to get paid if I'm not going to get part of the cap table. That's just not how they're wired. And I'm not wired that way. I sometimes think that way, and I agree that sometimes it's beneficial from a business standpoint to think that way. But when I think about my default way to be, like how I wake up in the morning, that's not my motivation. My motivation is to continue to focus on creative work and to enjoy more creativity and the people I'm working with. And that itself is a big part of what I enjoy. And, you give somebody millions of dollars and you make them rich for a while, and then you let them kind of do what they want to do. And then they start to see, I don't want to golf, I don't want to just take hikes. I want to work, I want to build, I want to create. And most of the creation, most of the building is happening amongst workaday folk who have real jobs. And so that's like the community a lot of people choose to be a part of. Scott Cook was a billionaire who showed up to work at Intuit every day, like at 7:30, and ate in the same cafeteria as everybody else, and was always bouncing from table to table, just talking about one project after another. Just love to make stuff, man.
Well, Richard, it's been a pleasure learning about how your process is making it so that our clients have a better life because they can do their job. They can take care of a lot of compliance issues. They can get rid of a lot of the headaches, and they're heard. It's really, I think it's really special to be able to hear them, help them articulate what they want, get a team that understands it, involving the development team, the project management team, leadership team, all to get alignment to build something that the client really values. So it's been a pleasure, and look forward to our next call together.
Yeah, Jeff, terrific. Thanks. So much fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Seamless Success. Start elevating your strategies as a mailer and make a big impact on this continuously evolving industry. Like what you just heard? Want to get more of it? Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a rating at podcast.windowbook.com. See you on the next episode.